think of the Olympic Games, the first thing you probably think of are the athletes that you know best, like Usain Bolt, Michael Phelps, Simone Biles, or Gabby Douglas. Then maybe you'd think of your favorite sports to watch at the Games, like running, swimming, gymnastics, or skiing. But there's more to it than that. The Olympic Games are now the world's highest form of athletic competition, dating all the way back to 776 BC in Olympia, the traditional site of the ancient games. Women competed at a shorter race in Haria, a festival that was created to replace the Olympics for women who had been stopped from entering the games. The ancient games were abolished after 12 centuries in 394 AD by the Emperor Theodosius of Rome, who ruled over Greece for many years. However, the games were re-established in 1894 by Coubertin, but again were reserved for only male athletes. In fact, the first women were not allowed to compete at the Olympics until the 1900 Games, and there were only about 2.2% of the participants competing that year. Even with only 22 female representatives, these few women's actions broke gender and athletic barriers, as well as changed their perception of women in sports and created opportunities for other women around the globe. Margaret Abbott, Charlotte Cooper, and Helene de Portales competed besides 19 other women in a combination of 5 events: tennis, sailing, golf, croquet, and equestrian. Women were only admitted in sports that were seen as compatible with their femininity and fragility, and were therefore excluded from the showpiece event that was track and field.
In antiquity, women were not allowed at all to take part in Olympic Games. Due to the legal systems in most of the ancient city-states, women were not allowed to participate in any kind of public life. When the first women took place in the Olympics, which are Charlotte Cooper, which was Hélène de Portales, and which was Margaret Abbott, those 3, let's call them heroines of the Olympic movement, won the first medals in 1900. Surely this did not take place with big interest of Pierre de Coubertin and his male colleagues, but the society calls for participation of women.
The 1900 Olympics were held in Paris, France, and were only the second Olympic Games of the modern era. Due to the fact that Paris's main attraction that year was the Paris Exposition, also known as the World Fair, many athletes were not aware that the competition they were entering was the Olympic Games. In the late 19th century, the lack of rights for women was apparent around the world. While voting is often correlated with the women's rights movement, there are many more urgent issues that had to be solved. Women were fighting for equal family responsibilities, education, and economic opportunities, along with equal rights in politics. The 1900 Olympics approached, many countries had started the push for women's rights, but there was a long way to go. In Sweden, women fought for rights in the working class and became involved in the press. From 1835 to 1865, certain economic liberties were given to unmarried women due to the fact that people realized they had to provide for themselves. Offering this to married women wouldn't be done because many thought of it as a threat to the basic order of society. At the same time in America, the American Women's Suffrage Association was formed. Slow victories were happening as by 1896, women could vote in 4 of the 45 U.S. states. Until 1878, women were prevented from receiving higher education. William Pankhurst eventually founded the Women's Social and Political Union to continue the fight for women's rights in the UK. By 1888, 1,400 women were protesting for better conditions and higher wages at a factory in London. 2 decades later, somewhere between 300,000 and 500,000 advocates gathered at a rally in London to support women's rights. Incorrect medical beliefs also played a part in the lack of women in sports and athletics at this time.
Before the first women competed at the Olympics, there were a lot of people that didn't believe it was safe or even physically possible for women to play sports. But then once those women did compete, they didn't die, and all of a sudden everyone realized it was not only possible for women to compete in sports, but they're actually pretty good at it, and it's actually pretty cool to watch. As soon as just even one woman does something for the first time, that gives inspiration, confidence, and motivation to all other women to join in on that activity and to think about breaking barriers in other areas too.
Medical professionals claim that women only had a certain amount of energy to use in a month, and if they used more, even by studying too much, they would become infertile. The women who competed in the 1900 Olympics proved this untrue, breaking a medical barrier through their actions as well as the various other barriers that existed in terms of women's rights at this time. One of the female athletes that competed in the 1900 Olympics was American golfer Margaret Abbott, the first American woman to win an Olympic championship. She found a love for golf and began playing with her mother at the Chicago Golf Club. She and her mother vacationed to Paris and entered what they thought was a small, local golf tournament. During the competition, Margaret won the gold and her mother placed 7th. These two incredible women broke barriers by becoming the only mother-daughter duo to compete in the same Olympic event at the same games to this day. After winning the competition, Margaret returned home to the U.S. The following year, she married her husband, Finley Peter Dunn, which is how we know most of the information about her life due to the fact that the majority of her later life was seen through the work of her husband. Charlotte Cooper was a Scottish tennis player who competed at the Olympics under the British flag. She broke many barriers during her competitive years, even continuing to compete after losing her hearing at age 26. She went on to become the first woman to win Olympic gold in an individual event. She began winning impressive titles at the age of 25 and won her first Wimbledon singles tennis title in 1895, going on to win 4 more. She went on to break more barriers by setting the record for the oldest person to win Wimbledon at 37 years and 296 days, a record that still stands today. Helene de Portales competed in the 1900 Olympics in the sailing event on the Swiss boat the Lorena. De Portales was the second woman to win a medal at the Olympic Games. Her team won the gold medal in the 1 to 2 ton class and a silver medal in the second race. De Portales served as the only woman on the crew, while her husband was the helmsman and her husband's nephew was also a crew member. Many barriers are broken slowly over time, and most are not physical things we can see, but rather something internally, like in a person's head or within society. Women at this time, however, faced multiple barriers. Training for the Olympics requires endless hours of practice, and many women were discouraged from participating in athletics, as people thought a woman's job at this time was to bear children for her husband. Dr. Bonnie J. Morris said that sport desexed women. Also, these women had to break the stereotypical gender barrier that existed at this time. Even the limited press that these women received focused mainly on their physical appearance, as it was noted that the Frenchmen present were apparently mesmerized by Miss Abbott's blonde beauty.
Well, those first women that competed in the Olympics were incredibly brave. Not just to go out and compete where no one was sure if it was possible or safe, but certainly they were targets for negative comments and heckling, and they had to put up with a lot. They had to kind of learn, by experimentation. They had to forge the path, and there's no doubt in my mind that their sacrifice and courage and bravery set the stage for all the female athletes that have followed, including myself.
These women's efforts made an impact that is still being felt today, over a century later. In the Pyeongchang 2018 Winter Olympic Games, the ratio of male to female participants was about 59% to 41%. This is about 19 times greater than the percentage of women that competed in the 1900 Olympics, where only 2.2% of the participants were women. The number of women in the Games has been rising steadily for the last 6 generations. In the Tokyo 2020 Summer Olympic Games, it is estimated that 48.8% of the participants will be female.
There had been even more disciplines with women participation than male disciplines, because the discipline of synchronized swimming only was a discipline for women. Don't forget now Charlotte Cooper, Helene de Portales, and Margaret Abbott as women who fought for the rights of women participating in the Olympics, and we hope that we continue fighting for the rights of women in sports, and who knows, one day perhaps football games, baseball games, soccer games will be regarded as valuable as the soccer day games with male participants.
By becoming the first women to compete in the Olympic Games, Margaret Abbott, Charlotte Cooper, and Helene de Portales, along with the other 19 women who competed as well, broke down the gender and athletic barriers that existed at that time. Their actions created a legacy that allowed other female athletes to excel in sport throughout the last century.